The morning sunlight slid through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, laying long golden stripes across the oak desk. I traced one with the tip of my freshly manicured finger, the pale pink polish still glistening from yesterday's appointment. Somewhere below, New York hummed with its usual chaos: honking taxis, hurried footsteps, the distant wail of an ambulance. But up here, the world felt almost suspended. My phone buzzed against the glass surface. Once. Twice. A third time. I finally glanced down. Marianne Blake. The name hit me like a gust of cold air. Marianne, my old boss. The woman who once smiled with a mouthful of promises and then cut me off without hesitation. I hadn't heard her name spoken in nearly 3 years, yet it still carried the sting of that single brutal afternoon. A voicemail notification blinked. For a heartbeat, I considered deleting it without listening. But curiosity, or maybe a quiet, defiant pride, made my thumb hover, then tap. Her voice poured into my ear, lower and more hesitant than I remembered. "Hi, Hannah. It's Marianne. I could really use your help. It's urgent." I leaned back in my leather chair, the smooth fabric whispering beneath my silk blouse. The irony almost made me laugh. 3 years ago, she'd fired me for daring to interview elsewhere, after denying me a raise I had earned in every possible way. Now she needed me, and she didn't even know just how far I'd come. 3 years earlier, my life looked nothing like the polished calm of that office. I was 27 and working 60-hour weeks in a cramped glass cubicle on the 31st floor of a midtown high-rise. The city's noise rattled through the window panes, and the fluorescent lights overhead hummed like impatient bees. That Thursday afternoon, I sat across from Marianne in her sleek, monochrome office. A single orchid leaned toward the sunlight behind her, perfectly still, as if even the plant feared disturbing her. My palms were damp against the folder of performance reports I'd compiled. Numbers didn't lie. I'd grown our biggest client's revenue by 17% in 1 quarter. I'd trained 2 junior analysts. I'd delivered every project early. "I'd like to talk about a raise," I began, my voice steadier than the tremor in my chest. Marianne's lacquered nails clicked against her coffee mug. "A raise," she repeated, eyebrows arching. "Hannah, we're in a tight budget cycle. Everyone's tightening belts." "I understand budgets," I said softly, "but my work has consistently exceeded the goals we set. I believe a salary adjustment reflects that." Her smile sharpened. "Ambitious, but not realistic. Be patient. Good things come to those who wait." Something inside me tightened, like a ribbon pulled too hard. My grandmother's voice floated back from childhood. "Never let anyone convince you that your worth is a favor." I carried her silver locket in my pocket that day, the one she'd given me at graduation. I pressed it between my fingers beneath the desk, its cool edges a quiet anchor. That night, after the office emptied and the janitor's cart squeaked down the hall, I updated my resume. I wasn't reckless. I was ready. I interviewed discreetly, coffee meetings before dawn, video calls in the privacy of my tiny studio. Each conversation reminded me that my skills had value far beyond Marianne's approval. 2 weeks later, I was called into her office without warning. She didn't offer a seat. "I've learned you've been interviewing elsewhere," she said, each word crisp as broken glass. "We don't keep disloyal employees. Pack your things. Security will escort you out." The locket burned cold against my palm as I nodded. My throat ached, but no tears came. I walked out of that building into the biting March wind with only a cardboard box and the silver locket in my pocket, shaken, but already planning what came next. The first few weeks after Marianne fired me felt like free-falling. My tiny studio apartment, barely wider than the length of my couch, echoed with the sound of unanswered job applications. The city outside seemed to speed up while I stood still. At night, I would trace the smooth curve of Grandma's silver locket, letting her favorite saying steady me: "Your worth isn't a favor. It's a fact." I refused to let her voice become a relic of the past. Each morning, I forced myself into a routine. Up at 6, sneakers laced, A quick run through Central Park before sunrise painted the reservoir pink. Then coffee strong enough to jolt the doubt from my bones, and a full day of sending resumes, networking on LinkedIn, cold emailing anyone who might listen. I called it my unpaid full-time job. A month in, a message landed in my inbox from Evelyn Ross, a name I barely recognized from a conference years ago. She was a senior partner at a boutique financial consultancy, small but nimble, the kind of place that thrived on hustle and creativity. "I heard what happened," she wrote. "If you're free for coffee, I'd like to talk." We met the next morning at a quiet cafe on the Upper West Side. Evelyn had silver streaks in her dark hair and the kind of grounded presence that made you want to exhale. "I know talent when I see it," she said after our second latte. "Come help me build something better, something where good work is actually valued." Her confidence in me lit a spark I hadn't felt in months. I joined her firm the following Monday. The work was intense. Late nights under the glow of spreadsheets, client calls that stretched past midnight, but it never felt like drudgery. Evelyn treated every idea like it mattered. When I proposed a data-driven pitch for a major healthcare client, she simply said, "Run with it." 2 months later, we landed that client. The contract doubled the firm's revenue. Evelyn handed me a glass of champagne and grinned. "You just paid your own salary 10 times over. Remember that." From there, the wins multiplied. A major tech company, a national retailer, a nonprofit with global reach. I learned to trust my instincts, to present with a voice that didn't shake. And as the firm grew, so did my role, from consultant to partner, then to co-owner. Still, I kept my success quiet. My social media remained understated. Photos of Central Park sunsets, the occasional coffee cup, never the boardroom triumphs or the sleek new loft I bought in Chelsea. I wasn't hiding out of fear. I simply wanted my work to speak louder than the noise of gloating. Somewhere along the way, the sting of Marianne's betrayal faded into something more useful: fuel. Each late night, each bold decision, carried a trace of the fire she had sparked when she underestimated me. By the end of the second year, I'd built a career far beyond the walls of her office, one that belonged entirely to me. It was a gray April afternoon when fate finally looped back on itself. I had just finished a quarterly strategy session in our new Madison Avenue headquarters, a space of airy glass and pale oak, when my assistant stepped in. "There's a Miss Blake on the line," she said, hesitating as if she wasn't sure she'd heard the name correctly. My pulse gave a quiet, startled kick. "Marianne Blake." "Put her through," I said, keeping my voice even. A brief crackle, then that familiar, clipped tone. "Hannah." "Marianne Blake. It's been a while." 3 years, I replied, almost lightly. "Yes. 3 years." Her sighs softened the edges of her voice. "I'll be direct. My firm is in negotiations with a major client, a client I understand you now represent. We need to partner with your company to secure the deal. I'd like to meet. Please." For a moment, I simply watched the city outside. Yellow cabs threading through traffic, clouds brushing the tips of the skyline. "Send me the details," I said. "We'll schedule something." 2 days later, she arrived at our offices. I chose the main conference room intentionally. 20-foot windows spilling natural light across an oval table of Italian marble, abstract paintings in soft blues and golds lining the walls. The air smelled faintly of fresh lilies, Evelyn's touch. I stood at the head of the table, a navy suit skimming my frame, the silver locket resting just beneath my collar. Marianne stepped inside wearing a tailored black sheath and the same brand of confidence she once wielded like a weapon. But today it faltered. Her eyes darted across the room as though measuring every polished detail. "Hannah," she said, extending a hand. "You look well." "I am," I answered simply. We took our seats. She launched into a carefully rehearsed pitch about collaboration, her voice brisk but tinged with something I'd never heard before: uncertainty. When she finished, I let a beat of silence stretch between us. Then I opened the leather folder in front of me, revealing the contract draft I'd prepared. My name was printed at the bottom beside Evelyn's, under the title Managing Partner and Co-Owner. Marianne's eyes flicked to it, and for a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. You, co-owner? Yes, I said, letting the words settle like a stone dropped in still water. Evelyn and I built this firm together. We decide which partnerships make sense for us. She blinked, lips parting, then closing again. For once, she looked human. You've built quite an empire, she finally managed. I leaned back, fingers brushing the cool edge of my locket. I had good motivation. Color rose in her cheeks. Hannah, about the way things ended, I may have been too harsh. I tilted my head, studying her. This was the woman who once told me to be patient, to wait quietly for good things. And here she sat, needing the very person she'd dismissed. Perhaps, I said gently. But that day forced me to realize something. My worth isn't a favor. It's a fact. And I stopped waiting. Silence pooled between us, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. I hope we can work together, despite our history. I closed the folder with a soft click. That depends, Marianne. On the terms. Her gaze met mine, searching, almost pleading. In that moment, I felt no bitterness, only the quiet, steady power of someone who had built her own future. I let the silence hang for a long breath, long enough for the soft tick of the wall clock to become the only sound between us. Marianne's hands, always so perfectly still, now rested tensely on the table, fingers interlaced as though holding themselves together. My team and I will consider a partnership, I said finally, my voice low but unwavering. But only under certain conditions. Her brows lifted slightly, a flicker of the old Marianne surfacing. Conditions? Yes. I slid the folder toward her. First, your firm will sign an agreement guaranteeing equal pay across all roles, audited by an independent board. No hidden gaps. No excuses. Her lips parted, then closed again. That's a significant change. That's the point, I replied. Second, every manager in your company will complete mentorship training. You'll launch a formal program to sponsor women at every level of leadership. And it won't be a token initiative. It will be measurable, funded, and reported publicly. Marianne exhaled through her nose, the faintest sign of surrender. And if we agree? Then we talk numbers, I said, folding my hands. But these aren't negotiable. She looked down, and for the first time I noticed the faint tremor in her right hand. It was strange, almost unsettling, to see the woman who once seemed unshakable now grappling for steadiness. I underestimated you, she murmured, not quite meeting my eyes. I felt a small, quiet heat bloom in my chest, not pride exactly, but something steadier. You underestimated a lot of people, Marianne. I was just the one who left first. Her gaze finally met mine, and in it I caught a glint of something like humility, or maybe simply the realization that the world had shifted, and she was no longer the center of it. Evelyn, who had been silent until now, spoke up with the ease of someone who knew the weight of leverage. If you're willing to meet those terms, we'll explore a partnership. Otherwise, we'll wish you the best. Marianne gave a single, slow nod. Send me the draft, she said quietly. I rose, smoothing the sleeve of my navy blazer. The silver locket brushed against my skin, a small, cool reminder of the voice that had carried me through the darkest nights. Your worth isn't a favor. It's a fact. Good, I said, offering a hand. Then we have the start of an understanding. Her handshake was firm, but the balance between us had already shifted, and we both knew it. 2 months later, the deal was inked. Marianne's company issued a formal announcement: equal pay across every department, a mentorship program for women, and a public commitment to transparency. The press covered it as a bold move in a competitive industry. I knew the truth. It wasn't boldness. It was necessity. But still, it mattered. Evelyn and I toasted the partnership in our office late one Friday evening. The city glowed outside, a scattering of lights against the velvet night. You know, she said, raising her glass, you didn't just win a contract. You shifted the culture of an entire firm. I smiled, letting the quiet pride settle over me like a warm shawl. Grandma would have said that's the real victory. After Evelyn left, I lingered by the window. Far below, yellow cabs traced bright paths through the dark, and for a moment I thought of that March night years ago. Me standing on the sidewalk, a cardboard box in my arms, the wind slicing through my coat. I remembered how small I'd felt, how my chest had ached with the shock of being thrown aside. I reached for the silver locket at my throat and opened it. The tiny photo of Grandma, edges worn soft from years of touch, smiled back. Her handwriting, on the slip of paper tucked behind the photo, read the same words she'd whispered to me countless times. Your worth isn't a favor. It's a fact. A slow, steady breath filled my lungs. The hurt from that day no longer stung. It had transformed into something far more enduring, proof of what resilience can build when no one else believes. Behind me, the office was silent except for the faint hum of the city through the glass. My reflection in the window showed a woman I hadn't yet imagined on the day I was fired, strong, certain, unafraid. Somewhere out there, Marianne was probably adjusting to her own new reality, learning to lead differently, maybe even mentoring a young woman who would never have to fight the same quiet battles I had. I closed the locket and let it rest against my heart. My worth isn't a favor, I whispered to the city lights. It never was. And with that final thought, I turned off the lights and stepped into the night, strong, independent, and entirely my own.